What we're going to explore next is we're going to take what we looked at in the last video and we're going to look at how we can go in and how we can begin to look at the more creative sides of blending. Now what I have here is just basically a document with a lot of different layers. Each of these layers is going to consist of a different image, and that image is going to have different colors, and we're going to explore a little bit about what happens when we just take these basic layers and we manipulate a couple of different things, mainly the blending mode and the opacity of that. So let's take a look at this right now. This is going to be our base layer, and what we will do is we'll begin adding layers on top and then changing the way that they blend, ultimately changing the way that they interact with the layers that are below them. What I have here is I have the smoke layer. Now what I want to do is I want to allow the smoke to interact with the layer below it without including the black area. The multiply blending mode will retain all of the darker values while canceling out a lot of the lighter values. So this is kind of the opposite of what I'm looking for. Screen blending mode, however, will give me what I want. It will allow me to blend the lighter values while canceling out the darker values. The cool thing about blending modes and working with layers is that you have a lot of control. This is basically as intense as this layer will get. One, because it has a screen blending mode. Now there are a lot of different ways that you can do this, and as we start to introduce adjustment layers next week, we'll look at some other ways that we can accomplish what we're going to do right now. But one way is to duplicate the layer. So I have two smoke layers now, both at 100% opacity. I can control this intensity through opacity changes. The next one we'll add are these circles. I'm going to go in and I'm going to change its blending mode. Again, dark values are not blended with the screen blending mode. Light values are. I think that's a little too intense, so I can control its opacity. As I begin introducing new layers, we can take a look at different ways to blend those as well. I'm going to take this layer and let's change it to multiply. We can also explore a couple of these through a series of shortcut keys. It'll take you a minute to cycle through these just by clicking and selecting. Shortcut key to cycle. I'm going to set this back on normal. So if you have your move tool selected, you can hold down your shift key and plus repeatedly press the plus key, and it will cycle down through your blending modes. The minus key will cycle back up. I like the darken blending mode on this one. If I think that's too intense, I can again control its opacity. 50%, 60%, 70%, all the way back up to 100% by pressing 0. The next one we can introduce is the light bulb. And we can take this one and we can change its blending mode as well. I could use soft light. I could use overlay, but I could also use screen or lighten. I think I like the lighten blending mode on this one. Now you're not limited to just blending image layers. We could introduce a new blank layer into this, and we could fill that layer with a color. Let's choose a color over here. I'm going to choose a purple, and I'm going to fill this layer with purple. Now there's a shortcut key for this. I'm going to fill this with my foreground color. Option delete will fill that layer with a foreground color. I'm going to choose the lighten blending mode. And if I think that's too intense, I can start controlling its opacity. Again, there are a lot of ways that we can get this same end result. This is just a way to explore different types of blending modes. introduce a couple more. Overlay. I think that's pretty intense. We can turn that down, still retaining some of the texture. Let's add this starry sky. Let's use a screen on this one. Again, we can control its intensity. And then the last one, we can use a screen or a lighten. I think I like lighten. Move it around. And again, we can control its opacity. Now as we get into masking and adding layer mask to this, there's a lot more that we can do with this, but just as an overall blend, this is a good place to get started.